Welcome to the second part of the Claude tool. So this part we're going to make a digital asset. So if you followed along, you would already have a setup like this. And we're going to make a digital asset out of that. So usually I would select everything and I would go here to make digital asset from this selection, so which is everything. But in this case, I want to approach it a bit differently. So I want to have inputs into my tool. I can already do that right now. So I want my grid object, which is like the actual Claude object, to be an input. This box can also be an input, and this is then also my collision input. So instead of like selecting everything, I'm going to select this part, and I'm going to select a subnetwork or Shift C. And this will create a subnetwork. So this is not a digital asset. And what I want to do with this is to right click, and now we can say create digital asset or create a version digital asset. So one or the two is what you choose. So for production, you would probably go more into working with the version digital asset, so you can actually number those assets quickly. But if you just want to do like a very basic digital asset, it's just recommended doing this one. So this is for example, the tutorial Claude tool. And you're going to say accept. And we should now have our menu, and we have everything here. So we have our inputs by default. They don't need necessarily all three be there. If I just say, for example, minimum 1 and press apply and accept, then we, for example, don't need all of them to work. So only the first input is required. So if I would now press simulate, it will throw a error. And that's probably because of the group node here. So the group node, it will error because of this input here. You can simply fix this by putting a null node over here. So you can see that now it's working correctly. So this null node is just making sure that we are inputting sort of like almost like an empty, like a null, instead of actually having here, which is nothing. So it actually does something there for us. So reset simulation, and the plot is just falling down. Nothing special here. At this stage, I also want to make sure that we have an output node. So every time I do something, this always needs to be my output. So we have that all in order. So we can connect these things back again here. And let's go back to our asset and say edit properties. So we're going to go and jump into parameters. And we're going to create a few parameters. So we can keep the parameter menu quite small, or you can make it very large with a lot of options for the simulation. I probably prefer to go into like keeping it smaller. So if I give this to an artist, they can just quickly say, I need to simulate this with this, and press play, and it should work. So I'm going to keep it on the small side of things. So one of the first things to do here is the remeshing. So we're going to say target size. So we have to be careful with this in game as well, because if this value is creating too much topology or poly counts, then this will slow down our tool. So this will require some testing when we bring this into game engine. So I'm going to bring this over here, and we're going to say, for example, resolution quality or Claude quality, and we can press apply. As a small save right now, I'm just going to make sure that the range value cannot be 0. So I'm going to fill in like a very small number, like maybe 0.01. Let's write it for now. Then we can do something with UV. What I sometimes would do is use a UV transform. And with that, we can then quickly do a quick scaling or rotation of the UV. Like if I have a specific material and we want to like scale up or scale down the UV or rotate the UVs, we can just quickly do that here. I'm mainly interested now in the scaling. So just gonna say scale UV. This value should be 1, and it can go from, let's say, 0.5 to 2. Doesn't have to be that large. So I'm gonna press apply. Now this value, I'm gonna copy, and I'm gonna paste that over here. So This is just again a reference to the parameter. So as you can see, this is called SX. We can of course rename this to our own name if we want to. So this is now referencing those namings over here. Then we can actually have settings for our simulation, and we might make a folder for that. So we have simulation settings here. So we're just gonna call it simulation, and we might also need then a folder for the other ones. Just gonna call it geometry. So everything here is for geometry, and then all the other settings are for simulation. So for simulation, we can pick values from our configuration node. Like you could try to play around, for example, with like the mass. I'm just gonna probably leave it only with the stretchness. So I'm just gonna drag it over here. Just gonna call it plot stretch. Then I want to go to the actual solver, and we can, for example, play around with these values. So the scaling. So the higher this value, the quicker the simulation will happen. You can also do sub-steps, constraint iteration, smoothing iteration. This can help with some of the quality of the results. Can be interesting to have. I'm gonna just only pick here this friction, which has been useful. I'm gonna set this to 1 by default, or I think maybe probably going to 3 might be better. I'm just gonna grab it here. So we have static threshold, which we just rename to friction. You can also do the wind if you want to. Like if you want to have like a small wind blowing in this cloth to make appear more natural, or do a certain effect, we can do that as well. I think I'm gonna not necessarily include it here. There are some other settings you can try exposing. What I was also interesting is actually the reset button. So what is happening now is that if you go into simulation, like it's caching some of that data because it's not gonna want to recalculate every time something happens. It's gonna cache. So it's useful to then also have a reset button. So we can just drag the button into our system here, and then we have reset simulation. So press apply. We can also do here our post-processing. So if you want to like blur this a bit, or increase or add subdivisions or extrusion, I'm probably only gonna pick the blur. So I'm just gonna call it post blur. Then we have the poly reducing. So we're gonna go and add this to geometry to make sure that's a bit structured there. And we're also gonna go and grab the normal angle. So this can be renamed to normal, and press apply. And let's go back and see how our tool looks. So we have now those two tabs. So we have all these settings, so we can increase the quality, do UVs. Can use these settings as well. So that looks pretty good. So what I mainly want to tweak maybe is this should not necessarily be tabs. We can just go with a simple folder. So simple folder structures, press apply, and now we just have this menu, which is easier to work with than having to switch to the tabs because we don't have that much parameters here. What we also want to check here is then the in and output settings. So we're going to give this a proper name. So the first input is our cloth object. Second input is for sort of like pinning or sticking the cloth. So I'm just going to call it pin cloth. Then our third is for collisions. And press apply. So it's important that we give some proper naming because in Game Engine, we will see these 3 inputs and they will of course be used or displayed with this naming. So otherwise you might not necessarily know what to do there. So here if I press play, it will work pretty good and it will I think it's also automatically doing a reducer in real time here as well. It's doing real time poly reducing here as well. You can build a switch node in here, like using switch node. You can, for example, skip certain steps. Like for example, oh yeah, we only want to see this result, and then this is sort of like the final output, and then we just switch from one to another if you want to have that. That's something you can build in here also. For game engine, we need to make one more tweak because it's not actually going to simulate this fully in game, but only bring in a certain frame. And I will talk about that in the next video. So for this video, we made our digital asset. It's working really well. I can start using this in Houdini to make something for a scene in Houdini here and export this as FBX. But of course, you want to use Houdini engine, which I'll show in the next video. So hope you will watch that one and see you on the next one.